Good morning. Good morning. So I was asked to talk about this question: how, when everybody's becomes digital, what next? What happens after everything is digital? I mean, can we imagine a world where everything is digital? Well, so we've got to step and ask ourselves, how do we get here first? And how many of you know what this is? Anybody out there? No? This is a transistor. This is what makes digital possible. This was invented in 1947. There was actually more transistors grown than grains of rice in 2005. In 2010, we were manufacturing 1 billion transistors to every human alive. And that's what made digital possible. That's what makes all these innovations come possible. So what has these innovations done for us? Well, there are actually three things that we think the innovations have done. It helps, from a business perspective, drive productivity. It helps us go faster and drive innovation in performance in what we do. But the most important thing is, it helps make the world more predictable. And the speaker earlier was talking about following trends and trying to drive innovations in trends and so on. But actually, the predictability, that becomes really interesting. Your ability to use that data to understand what's coming next is really the fundamental difference in what we see in the world going forward. And what that's made, when we start to think about that, why is that? Well, that's because we've come from the era of tabulating machines and then the era of traditional machines into this new era of cognitive machine learning, systems that don't need to be programmed, that they can start to learn for themselves. And actually, that's where we start to see a whole range of new services, new applications that come possible. So what's coming beyond that? And there are actually two technologies that we're really excited about. The first one is quantum. And you'll have seen in the last few weeks that we've now made quantum available on the cloud. So if any of you want to start to play with quantum, there's a 5-qubit computer that you can actually use to try and test out some of those quantum algorithms that you might want to try. And bear in mind, if we get to the point where we have 50 qubits worth of computing power, that's the equivalent of a 10 teraflop computing system. Right? That's the kind of processing power that we'll have at our hands. Quantum will allow us to do things that we can't even imagine. We know that 50 qubit quantum computer will allow us to start to hack and understand a range of the encryption systems that we have by identifying the underlying factors that make up the algorithms, and that's all been proven. So quantum is going to create a completely new age of computing that we don't understand yet. At the same time, the brain-inspired computing, so on the right-hand side you see Synapse, True North chip that's being built, and it shows you can have 256 neurons. Each one of the neurons are programmable. You've got close to 1 million synapses, and each of those synapses are programmed. And each one of those will allow us to redefine the way in which we understand that data. So the plethora of data we've got there will be completely usable by these systems and allow us to reimagine the world. So you start to think, well, what we're starting to move into is a world where digital sensing allows us to experience the world in completely new ways. So as a human, we sense in terms of touch, in terms of sight, in terms of hearing and taste and so on. Each one of those aspects of our life will be transformed because we'll start to be able to sense in completely new ways. So if you imagine your phone, these algorithms will allow us to touch through the phone. It will recreate the touch of whatever the device is at the other end, what offers that image. So if you imagine a piece of glass with a piece of silk on it, and you run your finger over that silk, it will feel like silk, although it's glass. The same thing as if it's a knife, it'll feel like the knife. It won't cut you, but it'll feel like the knife. And we can get to the point where each one of these senses can be augmented with this technology. By understanding the digital signature of those technologies, we're able to recreate them and be able to make the sensation completely different. So all of a sudden, these technologies start to help us reimagine and re-experience the world in completely new ways. So just let me give you another example. So imagine now using some of these kind of technologies to have a conversation. So debating technology. So let's say if I was to ask the question, should we ban the sale of violent video games to minors?
Hello, and welcome to the IBM Debating Technologies demonstration. Today we shall focus on detecting relevant claims. To proceed, please select the topic and I will share with you my top predictions for pro claims and con claims. Scanned approximately 4 million Wikipedia articles. Returning 10 most relevant articles. Scanned all 3,000 sentences and top 10 articles. Detected sentences which contain candidate claims. Identified borders of candidate claims. Assessed pro and con polarity of candidate claims. Constructed demo speech with top claim predictions. Ready to deliver. You have selected the topic. The sale of violent video games to minors should be banned. I would like to raise the following points in support of the topic. Exposure to violent video games results in increased physiological arousal, aggression-related thoughts and feelings, as well as decreased prosocial behavior. In addition, these violent games or lyrics actually cause adolescents to commit acts of real-life aggression. Finally, violent video games can increase children's aggression. On the other hand, I would like to note the following claims that oppose the topic. Violence in video games is not causally linked with aggressive tendencies. In addition, most children who play violent games do not have problems. Finally, video game play is part of an adolescent boy's normal social setting. Would you like to discuss another topic?
So just think about what happened there. We clicked on a link and gave it a bit of text which said, should the sale of violent video games be banned, for minors be banned? The system was able to go through the 4 million Wikipedia articles. It was able to identify the articles that were relevant to that particular topic. It was able to identify the sentences that had particular provenance. It understood the provenance and what provenance means in that context. And it was able to then draw out the articles and identify the pro and con polarity of those arguments, and then convert those from text to speech. And it did that in 4 seconds. That's the kind of technology that exists today. But as we go forward, we've got to think about, where are we going to go going forward? The corporations that are there as corporations that we depend on, they're being changed. The challenges are, do we survive, and are we being disrupted by a bunch of startups that are going to destroy the business for us, or do we become the aggressor, and do we start to become a disruptor? And this is a challenge that every business out there is thinking about. At the same time, cities are also in the same place. Cities are trying to attract inward investment, and the city that I work in, Leeds, for example, we're helping them redefine their role in the world. But each one of these individuals is trying to identify the space that makes them unique and special. You know, smarter cities is a trend that's out there, and we're very careful in using the word smarter cities rather than smart cities, because we know this is an evolution. We know that this is a journey, and every step on that journey, we get smarter. We've got to try and drive more GDP. We've got to create more local jobs. We've got to make it a resource-sustainable environment. We've got to start to be able to create vibrant communities that people want to come and live and work in. But at the same time, we've got to cope with the aging population. And so each of these sets of challenges provides a unique opportunity. For each one of you out there trying to innovate, it creates a great opportunity. And as you start to think about business in its biggest context, each of those businesses is also trying to innovate. And what I'm trying to show here is 5 patterns for how the business model evolves through the combination of this big data, the new algorithms that are coming along, and some of the new insights from new forms of data. And each one of those patterns gives you a new way of imagining the world. I'm going to quickly run through them. So the first one says, anything that gets manufactured, any product, this bottle, as it left the factory gates, nobody knows what happened to that bottle. The manufacturer has no idea. But through augmentation, through adding sensors and connectivity to that bottle, we could stay connected to that, transforming from a product into a service. Once we've got people-centric pieces of the business, by replacing those people with software, we're able to create that same service as a digital service in the cloud, and we start to disrupt the service in its own context. By being able to combine data across multiple organizational boundaries, we're able to optimize that process and optimize the way in which that process runs. And we see that with a whole range of travel-related transportation services right now. Any data that you've got in a business is asset to somebody else. And we know data goes through the same kind of manufacturing cycle as other things do, and that manufacturing cycle can turn that into a real tradable asset. And anything that's physical, a digital representation of that allows completely new interaction patterns. And in the paper that we published in Harvard Business Review a couple of years back, we talk about these patterns in a lot more detail. But then you ask yourself the question, that's great, but And these may help us identify some nice ideas. But what then? How do I create a team that can actually go and take these ideas and create them into real value? And that's where we start to look at what are the new competencies. What are the new competencies of people that are able to do these disruptions and create new value? And these competencies are kind of very different from the ones that we've seen in the past. And if you come into my workshop later on today, we're going to unpack these some more. So there are 5 new types of competencies. The first competency is the squirrel. The ability to innovate and gather new forms of data and start to really understand what data we have at our disposal. The owls are the wise ones who sit back and understand the spectrum of data and understand what the value from that data is, reimagine business by using that data. They're the real visionaries, the bridging between the digital environment and the business value environment. And then we have the foxes, the theorists. And these are the cunning guys. They're hunting packs. They're the algorithmic geeks that know how to produce that one line of code that is absolutely magical, really gets the understanding from inside that code. But once we've got these ideas and capabilities, how do we then turn that into a robust, dependable, reliable system that millions of people can use? And that's where the Weaver birds come in. And you're maybe not familiar with the Weaver birds, but that little picture gives you an example. They're tiny little birds that are able to create these really ornate, massive nests, and that's how they attract the mate. And these engineers are able to create, out of these fragments of data, these fragments of insights from these foxes, really complex, ornate systems. But at the same time, we've got to do the right things. We need the hawks who are well above there, watching the privacy and ethical aspects of the data and making sure we're doing the right things. So fundamentally, this is about transforming the way in which we imagine data and data as a manufacturing pipeline, almost as we do imagine the manufacturing process in the traditional sense. If I was to put a lump of iron ore on the table here, and you looked at a lump of iron ore, you wouldn't think of that as a car. You wouldn't think of it as a Tesla, but going through the manufacturing process, it does become this new thing, which is the car, which is really appealing. And through the same kind of manufacturing cycle and process, data starts to become really valuable. And ultimately, it's about creating some of those new experiences. It's about reimagining the world that we live in, starting to make the world more meaningful. And ultimately, it's about making sure we're doing things that really matter. What I'm going to close on is a short story, which is one of my favorite stories. I don't know how many of you are familiar with trains and the railroad, but one of the biggest problems that we have with trains, especially the big trains in the US with the big freight trains, is cracked wheels. You know, when we have a train that's going through thousands of miles, it's going through different temperature zones, it's got a very heavy load on it, a cracked wheel is an absolute disaster. And the cracked wheel means that you will get a derailment. You will lose the value of many of the goods that are on that train. What's worse still, it can potentially kill lives. So what do we do?
$230,000 train cars, 32,500 miles of track, 2,000 sensors detecting changes in temperature, vibration, alignment. All factors that could cause a derailment. But one cause can be especially hard to spot: a single cracked wheel. And out of more than 1.5 million wheels, how do you find the right one? By listening. You can't hear it, but analytics can. Working with IBM, a railroad analyzes 100,000 data points a day to help stop trouble before it starts. IBM Analytics is working to make every industry smarter every day.
So a tiny little microphone on the carriage of each of those trains allows us to listen to the sound from each of those wheels. That tiny sound is then transmitted back to an analytics engine. The analytics engine is able to decipher that sound and make sense of it. Cognitive algorithms have learned the patterns for when a train wheel sound is normal versus when it's about to crack. The early warning allows us to send a message back to the driver and tell him to stop because you've got a cracked wheel coming on. Now, this absolutely saves lives. And you can imagine the squirrels in this were the ones that were able to figure out where to put the sensors. The foxes were able to create those cunning algorithms. It was actually the owls or the visionaries who understood how we could create this solution. They understood the real problem. And then the engineers, the weaver birds, were able to transform that into a robust system which we could put on multiple trains and run that for a significant period. So this is an example of addressing a problem that really matters. But really, the value of all this the next era of digital is it's really able to make our dreams come true. And I love this quote from Walt Disney because it really explains that if we think about things, we can solve the bulk of the issues that exist in the world, whether it's about providing water to those that haven't got water, providing food to the people, or even solving some of our energy problems. These are massive societal issues. And we know by the emergence of these new sets of technologies, new sets of capabilities, we'll start to address many of those problems. So that's all. Thank you very much.